Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this LinkedIn event about erasing technical debt without asking for money, or at least not too much money. So, um, we'll see if if I can convince you how to do that. Okay. First, a little bit about me, and this is the only advertising page. You see my website down the bottom, my company name, but uh, that will be all the advertising I do today. About me a little bit, I'm now an independent consultant. Before, I've worked in the consulting industry. I've worked for a big software vendor, and I've worked for some very large companies in the industry. So I've kind of seen the software world from many angles. And then in my last role, I was the chief architect leader in charge of IT strategy and architecture for a large international company. So enough about me, and we'll get started. So the what I really want to talk about is first talk about how do you how do you get into this situation of technical debt. There's obviously through acquisitions and so on, but there's some components you have to put in place so that technical debt doesn't sneak up on you again. So you've probably heard some of these pain points like the business buys IT, especially in this SaaS world. Don't you love it how vendors more and more are going straight to the business as business buying IT solutions, and then comes to IT and says, "Oh, could you plug this into our ecosystem?" It never happened to you, right? But it's a pretty common problem nowadays. And then what I see a lot, this is one of my favorites, is there's really a lot of ad hoc strategy then, right? So, and by that I mean really IT strategy, because if you're not in the game all the time, someone's making these IT decisions to you. How can you funnel that down a clear strategic path if everybody feels like they're in charge of portions of the IT strategy? So you have this kind of ad hoc model where you're constantly reacting to changes that you didn't foresee or didn't plan to start with, and that then leaves you're left cleaning up the mess. And this mess I call technical debt. So you've inherited a lot of technology and software solutions that are duplicative, you didn't really need. Often it's an acquisition or a merger that can happen. And like I said, it can happen because of these things up here. We'll focus mainly on the technical debt below, but some things I'll highlight real quick, and maybe I'll be able to talk about it in a separate time. Let me change my color here. Is up here. This is really around the engagement model. If that isn't clear, this who makes what decisions, how do we follow a joint strategy will never be solved. So as chief architects and whoever is in charge of really driving the IT strategy in your company, if you don't have an effective engagement model, this is what starts happening. Everybody starts making decisions independently. And then the ad hoc strategy is I'd just quickly say this has to be someone's job. What you see a lot is people love doing IT strategy, especially your colleagues in the IT department, right? They're kind of held accountable for the areas to be, run well and following some strategic path. The problem is, again, then everybody in their IT silo, now not the business silo, will start forming their own strategy. It should be somebody's job, ideally your chief architect's job, who's held accountable and responsible and has the authority to drive the IT strategy. So it needs to be someone's job, and that needs to be somehow made clear. And then on technical debt, there's different things you can do. I assume low-hanging fruit is something you've already taken care of, so I won't talk about that. That means a typical example that happens all the time is look through all the reporting you've done and see when the last time that report was run. You'll see some that were run a year and a half ago, and they were invented a year and a half plus 3 months ago. And then somebody created it, never used it. They might be tied to some specific data store just for that report. Allows you to get rid of all that waste and the maintenance, and maybe some of them might be triggered through some job scheduling, all this kind of stuff you can clean up. So same thing you could do on the application side, theoretically. I mean, somebody's built some small, maybe custom application and nobody uses it anymore. Just turn it off. Okay, so that's low-hanging fruit. We won't talk about that much. And then crisis. This seems to happen quite a bit, right? This stuff up here that I talk about, up here in terms of these bad things that happen up here. After a while, your systems get so clunky, they go, we need a new CIO, or some crisis like that happens, or, a major system outage and people start going, shoot, we got to take care of this stuff. A crisis happens, and then you might be able to fund some major initiative to fix it. Typically, it's not a good idea to have that crisis happen. That often leads to very uncomfortable situations or job losses. And then finally, what I do want to talk about is the simple concept which I call the open patient. Hope I spell patient correctly, yeah. This is tie your cleaning up of technical debt to major transformations. Because, and I'll explain why in a little bit more, but you can tie to them. They have enormous amounts of funding. There's a lot of activity there. While you're doing stuff, you can clean up garbage around it. So again, what's nice being a chief architect is typically, and again, we can talk about the engagement model some other time, you have insight into all those big things that are happening, and you can tie yourself to those transformations and then make it a standard process then that can be applied also to smaller programs. But let's start with the big transformations, and you can start using those then to clean up technical debt at a very low cost. And here's the major reason why it's a low cost. So let me see if I can forward this slide. Yes. Oops. So there's the open patient, and what's important about the open patient. If you let's just talk about total implementation costs. So I'll draw a little box and say, let's just do a bar chart. Maybe black isn't the greatest color for this, but that's how much in dollars go up, your implementation costs to typically do work, right? Now there's a portion of this implementation which I will call down here, which is actually very large, which is in here, down here. This might have testing. This will have some fixed support, like PMO, project manager, infrastructure team, tech coordinator for development, blah, 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 blah. There's all kinds of costs that are down here, and they're almost fixed, right? So if you add your program, then there's only these costs down here. These are basically already covered. You don't need to add to the program. You don't need another program manager. You don't need another PMO office. You don't need another person to coordinate with the offshore development team. You don't need another infrastructure team for whatever little bit of infrastructure you might need to add to be able to eliminate something that's in the realm of where you're working. So if you look at it here, up here, then here are what's maybe left. This then is maybe the costs that are left to do as a to add. So the entire costs would normally be this much, versus if we're just adding a little bit. And I would say normally this graph is more like this. This line is up here, and these are the only additional costs you're adding, versus if you had to do it as your own project, kick it off, do all these kind of things, get the business involved, it ends up costing your company a lot more. So by tagging on to a program, you're saving tons of money. And that's really kind of the major concept. And again, what you do, which it might be, so let's say this, you have a big transformation in the, let's say, a supply chain planning program. And within supply chain planning, you need to now integrate with order management, you need to integrate with your inventory management systems, you need to integrate with your manufacturing systems to do all kinds of stuff. Well, think about all the apps that are in the supply chain space that you might want to get rid of. And make that part of that program. Don't let the program go by and let a little piece of some hardly used supply chain planning software stay. Nuke it. And make it part of this program. And the incremental costs to nuke it are close to nothing for this program. And then, why I mentioned these integration points, there might be a lot of integration points to clean up. You might have done point-to-points that you want to get rid of that you never had a reason to get rid of. Well, if you're going to have to do some work on these integration points anyway, well, do it the right way. Do a publish-subscribe kind of middleware solution that's a lot more effective to then later plug and play. And eliminate kind of your integration, some of your integration technical debt. So that's how you then go about it. You look at the scope of supply chain planning, look at the areas you wanted to get rid of in supply chain planning, see if you can make that part of that transformation, look at the integration architecture and see if there's something there to clean up. And that allows you then to reduce some of the technical debt in this area. And then the next program might be in the finance area. And you look at finance and you look at everything around it and so go, okay, there's these two little apps here that I always wanted to get rid of. Let's make that part of that scope. And then your income across for the program is only going to be this much. Rather than it's going to be this much on its own and you'll never be able to justify it. Okay, hopefully this chart was clear, but this is kind of the main point. The other thing you want to do though is if this isn't normal for your company, look at some of the transformations that you're aware of that are coming ahead, and kind of draw it as let me draw these axes. This is the opportunity. I should start drawing those in. Why don't I see white? Let's do something very bright. Opportunity. And here's, call it willingness to participate. So this on the bottom axis, and you can kind of draw your typical 2x2. On the bottom axis is, hey, are these people really willing? People that get it more from the business partner side. That go, oh yeah, I want to get rid of this junk, but I never had the opportunity. Great idea. Let's get rid of this trash. And then there's business partners who are like, no, I don't want you to add a penny to my scope. I don't want to. This is too confusing. Don't bother me. Thank you. Okay. The latter is over here and the former is over here on this axis. And then there's the opportunity. So if you look at, let's say a big transformation happens to be in something, you're trying to get closer to the customer, doing something on the sales side, and your sales area was always a huge mess that now you realize that huge mess won't work anymore for your new go-to-market strategy. Wow, that is a huge opportunity to get rid of all the crap and go to market. So that opportunity then in that area might be really big. In others, it might be only down here. Some things might be here, and you can start plotting your projects. So what I would say you do is don't go for these. Simply, if you have a business partner who really doesn't want to play ball, even if the opportunity is large, I'd avoid it. Again, if you haven't done this before, get some credibility on your back with a business partner that wants to work with you. And then obviously, the higher you can go, on this curve, this direction of programs in here, in this area, the better off you are. So it's also important to kind of pick the right program in terms of how is that partnership going to work and how big is the opportunity. Obviously, something up here in this quadrant up here is clearly the best. Is clearly, your number one favorite. So if you're somewhere up there, that's clearly a great place to be. Why is it not advancing? Sorry, I had a little technical glitch there with my iPad. Okay, to continue, another thing to not forget, which is always important, is the business case. And now, in the business case, obviously you have this great advantage, right? You you're only dealing with the costs up here, right? So now, if you start listing any benefits, and again, a typical business case, there's tangible, which again you can express in dollars, and there's intangible, which you express through some statements that might be important. I always find both to be very important. Unfortunately, there are certain companies that only look at the dollars and not at these. By the way, it's also important for this reason, but we can't quantify it. I think it's a huge mistake. I actually often find these to be almost more important than the dollars, but I won't get into that one. But this is a typical business case, and what's good about it is these dollars only have to offset this amount here versus before, they would have to offset this amount in dollars. So from that perspective, it's very attractive. So what you do then is you basically take these dollars and add them to the transformation business case. Plus, obviously, these intangibles also. But again, this should make it a lot easier to justify getting rid of this technical debt versus just doing it as a project on their own. Very often, project on their own, very hard to justify. You're not really getting any business benefit out of it, right? Because you're just kind of taking some trash out. Versus if you tie that to a big transformation already has all kinds of benefits with it. You're increasing the cost very little, and then you can probably describe some of these benefits, and people go, okay, that makes sense. Let's do that. Let's take advantage of this opportunity. So that's how that works. Timing is something also to consider. If you look at what I'd call a typical program here is, let's take this. At the front, you have the idea. Then you need to get funding for the idea. Then you make the decision to actually go forward. Then you prep for the program. Then you blueprint it. Yeah, and then I'd say too late. I should make this. After that point of time, it's too late to join the club because they've already submitted what they're going to exactly build, all this kind of stuff. Nobody's going to want to add your program. Obviously, the sooner you arrive, the sooner you appear over here and make this part of I have this idea, supply chain transformation. Okay, let's look at your key business objectives of what we need to do, and let's look at technical debt elimination. And you can call it something more tangible that people might better understand, like take out the trash. I don't know what you want to call it. But so the sooner you do this, obviously it's a lot better, right? Because ideally, you want to make it part of the funding discussion and the decision, not come in later. But it is still possible, and this is where that's very important for the, if you have a willing business partner, you might be able to still jump in here as they're doing this. Hey, look, we're going to add some architects to the program or whoever, and going to do this analysis, and I think we can save the company some more money and blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay. Well, let's try that out, and we can always do it then as an option. And maybe what we do is we go, 50% we do in the later phases, and 50% percent we have a plan to do afterwards. You don't have to do it all with the transformation. Once you've got if you get the funding for it and the decision for it, you can do this a multi-phase thing. And obviously, the more you do with the transformation, the more you save on those costs. But sometimes, even if the transformation has multiple phases, go along with the phases where it makes sense to retire whatever appropriate technical debt. So that comes out in all this detailed planning, which, like I said, ideally, you always want to be here, but you definitely want to be in here before they lock the funding down. So somewhere in here, you need to engage. That's ideal. Okay. Enough about that, and that's really it. So to really summarize, it's getting in. It's about the open patience. So making sure to tie it to some transformation that's already happening. Get in early in that transformation to make the suggestion to also include reducing of technical debt, and then include in the business case, be honest about what it's going to do. If you don't need to, fine, that's even better. Often you do. But you can make the point that, hey, look, this is why this makes sense. And then once you're used to doing it, you can make this a regular process in your company, and you can even do it on not major transformation. Hey, part of every program is if we start doing something, changing something in an area, we look at what we want to fix. And then hopefully also you have another process so that technical debt never appears, which I talked about earlier, but that's a separate subject. But if you have technical debt, that way you can slowly chip away at it. Again, I just like to talk about next concepts, not next things you might want to do. You might, next section is run this concept by XYZ. You tell me who it should be. Who do I need to talk to? Maybe one of those willing business partners that you want to tee up with. And then stop creating these master app rationalization plans, I call them. So these typically don't work. Nobody wants to fund them. So stop doing that. Maybe X that out. Okay. Hopefully this was good. Again, I don't record Q&A and so on, keeping everything confidential for the people that join my sessions. So if you do in the future, don't worry about it. You will not be publicized in public who your company is or what questions you have. And that's really it. Thank you all very much. Take it easy. Bye.